Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my Sims 4 speedbuilding video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video, I'm going to be building in the world of Tartosa, which is the world that we got from the game pack, The Sims 4 My Wedding Stories, and I'm going to be building a big Italian family vineyard. So if I was you, I highly recommend that you go and grab yourself a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, a packet of crisps, chocolate bar, whatever you fancy, just something to snack on, because you might have noticed from the timestamp of this video that this one is a little bit longer, but I'm so excited to share it because this week I just sat down and just built this absolutely colossal vineyard, which is something that I wanted to build in the game, like an authentic one, for so long, and I've finally been able to do it. Now, previously I have built some things like around this kind of idea of having like a rustic Italian vineyard in The Sims 4, but up until recently we wasn't able to do it and for it to be fully actually functional. And what I mean by that is previously in some of the builds that I've done, I've built like Italian vineyards and had the idea of, right, this Sim's got loads of different wines in their cellar, they've got a bar, there's a juice making station, maybe they make wine. I've always gone for like that kind of idea. A little bit of play and pretend, because the juice making station that I'd previously used was from the Eco Lifestyle expansion pack, and it's basically just fizzy drinks that your Sims can make. But now, with the Horse Ranch expansion pack, we now have the ability to make Nectar in The Sims 4, which, I'm not even just saying this, but this is just as exciting to me as what horses are in the game, and I absolutely love horses. Like, the fact that we've now got horses in The Sims 4 just makes me so happy, and I've just had so much fun playing with them. But now we can actually build vineyards, and so this week I finally sat down and just built an absolutely colossal one, and yeah, this is how it turned out, so I really hope you guys like it. But getting on and actually talking a little bit more about the build. So the house ends up having 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and it's built on a 50 by 50 lot. The actual like structure of the house, I was looking at a picture that I found on Pinterest. It seems to be some sort of model, don't know what it is, it's really pretty though. I'll find it and I'll pop it up on the screen now. So I was originally looking at this when I started the build, but to be honest, it doesn't even end up looking anything like it. But I always like to mention it whenever I do look at pictures, whether I'm just trying to replicate something, if I'm just getting inspiration from it, or if I was just using it as like a bit of a starting point. I always like to mention it, just so you know. But you know, I found this kind of like model, rustic model of some sort of like Italian building on Pinterest, and it was just so pretty, and I just kind of took that and put my own little spin on it. The actual model itself seems to have a lot of different rocks and kind of like crumbling parts of the building, which I was debating doing, but then I just kind of went off on a tangent and then just kind of did something else. But then there ends up being quite a lot of rocks in the landscaping in this build, because it ends up being on a massive hill where I'm building on a 50 by 50, which is the biggest lot in this world. I really wanted to take advantage of that and use terrain manipulation, so I did build this house eventually on a hill, but then to kind of like cover up the harsh terrain where it kind of is completely flat and then it goes completely upright, and then there's like a bit of a weird like hill thing, if you know what I'm talking about. I use a lot of rocks to make it look like the house is almost sitting upon some rocks. It's really pretty, but it took me forever as well. But there ends up being, yeah, quite a lot of rocks in the landscaping. The landscaping itself was so time consuming because where it is such a big lot, I just had loads of different areas to place down plants and trees and stuff. So I do end up cutting out some parts of it. I tried to keep in the parts that I felt like were essential and also were just really nice and kind of like satisfying to watch. But some of like the little nitty gritty areas, which aren't so much like the most interesting parts to watch, I did decide to cut it out. Where this is such a long video, I really struggled when it came around to editing, because originally I had around about 13 hours of pure footage for this build, and then once I sped it up and I edited it down the first time, the first cut of this video ended up being an hour and a half, which, I mean, I can talk, but I don't think I can sit down and talk for an hour and a half. Maybe that is something that I'll do one day, but today is not that day, and so it went through a lot of different edits, this video, just to try and get it down to some sort of a reasonable-ish kind of timestamp, which I say that the actual video itself without any screenshots is 53 minutes long, so that is just 53 minutes of pure recorded footage. I ain't got a clue what it's going to be once I've added the screenshots in, but I just really didn't want to cut too much out just because I love this build so much and I wanted to show you as many areas as I could possible. And yeah, I hope you don't mind that it's a little bit of a longer one. I have been doing quite a lot of longer builds recently because my last two videos, I think actually were around about 50 minutes long each actually. But one of them I built like a massive ultimate farm. So I basically built a lot that had cows and chickens and llamas and horses and literally every single type of creature or living being could be on that lot. And then the video before that was a massive horse ranch, and that was the first build that I did once I got my hands on the new horse ranch expansion pack. So my last few videos have been quite long. I really hope you don't mind, but I've just been wanting to build really big things recently, so yeah, I hope it's not an issue. I hope it's not a problem. But anyway, moving on and actually talking about what I'm doing right now. So you can see that I've already built like the main structure of the build, and I'm currently going around and playing around with these fence pieces. So these fence pieces are from the live edit menu, and you can find them in two different DLCs. One of them is Discover University. That is where we kind of like got first introduced to them. If you go to the world of Brychester, you will see these like bopping about in like the natural environment, the natural landscape. But then we also have them in the world of Tartosa, and you can also find them in the live edit menu for the My Wedding Stories game pack. Now, whenever I seem to do a build in the world of Tartosa, I always just gravitate towards these. I can never seem to place down just like a normal fence, just because they're so pretty and they're just so detailed. And I personally prefer these over like some of the actual fences that we have in the game. Don't get me wrong, we've still got some really nice fences in the Sims 4 like build category, but I sometimes find that the ones that you can find locked behind the live edit cheat are just a little bit more detailed and just a little bit more what I personally would want to build with. Now, normally, whenever I do use this fence, I'll normally stick to the more like straight pieces of the fence, if that makes any sense. If you was to look in the right hand side of the screen, you can see that I've used some of the straight ones, which are literally just a fence and straight line. And normally when it comes around to using them, I only really ever stick to them kind of pieces. But for this build, the way that I did the terrain manipulation, I kind of wanted it to seem like the house is on a massive hill and it looks like it's kind of on a bit of a cliff as well. But then I wanted the terrain to kind of look a little bit layered, almost like a wedding cake. You know how like a wedding cake has got like a traditional one's got like 3 tiers? I kind of wanted it to look like that. And so with doing that, I then wanted the shape of it to be a little bit higgledy-piggledy. You know, I wanted there to be a few different bump outs here and a few different curves, and I didn't want it to seem like it was man-made. I wanted it to seem like it was a little bit natural. And so with doing that, I was then able to use the live edit pieces, but they're in a little bit of a obscure shape. They're very fiddly, and it took me so long to actually get them to be completely accurate, to completely line them all up, and it is completely worth it because I just absolutely love the look of them. I use so many different pieces, basically going in a bit of a semicircle, and then it kind of like comes back around and then it goes back into a semicircle, basically fencing up like the top part of the lot. And then I also use some on like the balconies. I then also end up placing down some stair rails onto like the leading staircase up to the lot, and yeah, I just think it looks so beautiful. But over here where I'm just doing some terrain manipulation, this is where I end up adding some grapevines to make it seem like an actual vineyard. Now, you won't see me place them down just yet because I've still got a little bit more terrain manipulation to do. I still got a little bit more like faffing to do basically with terrain manipulation because it is so fiddly in this game. And something that I wanted to note as well, you see like the live edit pieces, how I've like pretty much placed them all down now, and they're kind of all in a certain way. They all like line up with one another. When I was doing the terrain painting, they kept on jumping up and down, and they just kept on going all over the place. And so it was so time consuming just getting it so the fence pieces sat completely flush with the terrain. Like, I didn't want there to be any gaps. I wanted it to be realistic, and realistically you're not going to have a bit of fence floating in the air. And so it took me so long to get it to a point that I was happy with. But I mean, I think it's worth it. It just looks, in my opinion anyway, just really pretty. But you can see that I've now moved over to the front of the lot. And again, I'm just going to go around and just do a little bit more terrain manipulation, try and make it seem natural. If I'm being completely honest with you, I didn't have a clue how I wanted the front of the lot to look like. Like I said, when I was building this, originally I came in and I had a picture that I found on Pinterest. It was of some sort of like rustic Tuscan model building, and I was like, right, okay, I'm going to use that as my inspiration point. I'm going to use that as kind of like my main source of inspiration for this build. Couldn't tell you what the front looked like. I didn't see it. But then when it came round to the front of the build, the walls of it and placing down, you know, like where the windows are going to be and how the roof is going to look, that was fine. But then in terms of like the terrain manipulation and just how the cliff portion of the build was going to look, didn't have a Scooby. But I'm really happy with the way it actually ended up coming together, because this is where the house really looks like it's built onto some sort of a cliff. over here I'm placing down all these different live edit rocks. The ones I placed down are from, I think, the Sims 4 base game, because I wanted to use the ones initially from the My Wedding Stories game pack, but then I remembered from a previous build that I did that the ones from the live edit menu from My Wedding Stories, when you zoom in, they disappear, which if I'm just building a build to be kind of like a bit of a show home, it wouldn't be so much of a deal. But I wanted this build to look nice, but then also be completely functional and also to make complete sense. And so I didn't want you, say for example, to download this build, your Sims are living in this massive vineyard, you've got a little family living here, and then when you're in the garden, what is meant to be the kind of like the cover up of the harsh terrain to disappear, it didn't make any sense. And so I decided to use some live edit rocks from the Sims 4 base game and just basically wrap them around the higher portions of the build, which, whilst we're kind of on the subject of the playability of this build, I feel like it is a very good point or a very good time rather, to mention the fact that I have, like always, fully playtest this build. I got my sim to playtest it with themselves, some horses, because I don't even think I've mentioned it yet, but there ends up being some horse stables in this build as well, so your Sims can live on a vineyard and also have horses. But I playtested it with an adult sim, the horses, and then also a kid, because there is a kids room in this build, and it is fully functional. It works 100% completely. I did run into a few different issues here and there, but the issues that I ran into, one of them was really bizarre, and it was in the kitchen, but I can't really explain it until you see the kitchen, so I'll talk about that in the kitchen. But with like the playability and things being usable, everything works. I run into like a few problems here and there of like maybe I placed down too much clutter next to one thing and it couldn't work. All I had to do was just nudge over the clutter like a centimetre and then it was worked. So if you do want to download the build from the gallery, then yeah, you shouldn't run into any problems. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But you can see that I've now moved over, and this is where I started adding in the portion to try and make it seem like somewhat of a vineyard. So over here I use 2 different bushes in kind of like combination to make it seem like a little bit more of a fuller area. So I initially use these kind of like darker bushes. They are from the My Wedding Stories live edit menu, and then I use them in combination with these grapevine bushes that are from the Horse Ranch expansion pack. Now I basically use 2 because I found that just the initial grapevines, the one from Horse Ranch with the purple grapes in them, they're a little bit too saturated for my liking. And don't get me wrong, I love a bit of colour, but I didn't want it to look so overly green, and so I used them in combination with this darker bush to kind of level it out a little bit, if that makes any sense. Now, where these are just bushes in the game, unfortunately I wasn't able to get them to be usable. Like, your Sims can't actually interact with these. They're just purely for decoration, kind of like storytelling purposes. I do want to mention quickly though that there is somewhere that your Sims can harvest all the different grapes and apples and all the different things to make nectar in this build. I'll talk about that in a second. But over here, yeah, unfortunately I couldn't just make it work so your Sims can actually harvest them. It looks really good, and I tried my best to make it seem like some sort of a used area. So you can see that I've just pulled out a bucket, and the bucket that I use is from the Cottage Living. I think that's like a normal build and buy, but then I found all the different grapes in the debug menu, and I basically sized them up and then rotated some of them and then plonked them inside the bucket to make it look like Sims have previously been out here. They've been going around all the different grapevines and then picking off the grapes and putting them in this bucket. I also then found this tool. Not a clue what it's called. You can see that I've placed it down already, but we got it from the Horse Ranch expansion pack in the debug menu. You know the new grass that we have, which your Sims can harvest? Whenever my Sims seem to harvest that grass, they always use this tool. It's basically like a massive hook. To me, it looks like something that you might use if you harvest grapes. I mean, I ain't got a clue. I've never harvested a grapevine before in my life, but I assume that you would use something like this. I mean, you might just use your hands, but for storytelling purposes, I thought it was nice to add it by that little bucket. But yeah, the actual grapevines themselves, they're not interactable. It's just purely for decoration. But I mean, I think it looks really pretty. There is also just somewhere that your Sims can actively go around and harvest grapes and apples and lemons and pretty much all the different ingredients to make nectar, but it's just not at the front of the build. But I just tried to make it seem like it was at the front of the build. But you know, at the back where I placed down them rocks, and I kind of made them so they were almost wrapping around the terrain, where I was trying to basically use them as a bit of a cover up. Well, on that little like patio area above that, I end up placing down so many different planters, and that's in them planters that I placed down grapes and I think apples, lemons, potatoes and spinach, which might seem like a little bit of a weird combo, but they are all the different ingredients that your Sims will need when they make Nectar. I mean, that's not all of them. I didn't include every single ingredient. Feel free to do so if you want to replace them, but I've already pre-planted them, so if you want to download this build, they're ready to go, like they're ready to be harvested. But I didn't place down every single ingredient because some of the ingredients to make Nectar are a bit questionable. Like, one of them is a trash fruit. I personally would not like to drink a bottle of wine that is made from a piece of trash fruit. Me personally, I mean, I don't know what you fancy, but I basically wanted there to be so many different grapes and then just fill in some other areas with, you know, potatoes and spinach and apples and lemon trees and stuff like that. But yeah, it is at the front of the build in kind of like that cliffed in area, if you want to put it that way. But currently you can see that I'm going around and just doing a little bit more landscaping. I have also placed down the horse jumps, so where there is a horse or two horses in this build, I wanted there to be somewhere where your Sims could actively train them, and so it ends up being kind of like at the front of the build. The actual horse stables themselves, there ends up being enough space for 2 horses, which every single build that I've done since the Horse Ranch expansion pack, I've just made space for 2 horses just because I like the idea of maybe like a parent having a horse and then like a kid having a horse. Maybe it's just me, but I really like the idea for like storytelling purposes. And for the Sims that I imagine to live here in my save file, it was kind of like a key thing anyway, because I have got quite an in-depth storyline for the Sims that are going to be living here in my save, which I am so in love with. And it is also inspired by one of my favourite films growing up, which, now I've said that, you might have some sort of inkling to what film I'm referencing, because I'm building a kind of like Italian, Tuscan, rustic looking vineyard that also has enough space for some horses. So you might have an idea of what film I'm talking about, but if you don't, I am talking about The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan. Absolute top-notch film, love it to pieces. I watched it so much when I was growing up. I'm pretty sure I had about like 10 VHS tapes when I was growing up. I had like a little old, like I say little old, it was actually a fat TV, but I used to have a TV that used to put VHS tapes in, and I only had like 10 VHS tapes, and so I used to watch them consistently, and The Parent Trap was like my go-to. Even nowadays, it's like a comfort film to me. I absolutely love that film, and so yeah, I inspired the storyline for the Sims that are going to be living in this house off the storyline in the film. Now, if you've never seen the film, it's not too much of an issue. Like, you don't have to know the film to know what I'm talking about. But basically, in the film, there is 2 girls, Lindsay Lohan, twice. Side subject, until I was about 10 years old, I genuinely thought Lindsay Lohan had a twin. I didn't realise it was kind of like CGI and they had painted in Lindsay Lohan into the screen when they were both on the screen. It was very cleverly done, that film, especially for when it came out, because I think it came out in the 90s. But yeah, I don't know if it was just me, but I generally thought Lindsay Lohan had a twin until I was about 10 years old. But in the film, there is 2 twin girls, and they go away at camp and they realise that they look very similar to one another. And then recently down the line, they discovered that they're actually twins and they were separated at birth, and one went with the dad and then one went with the mum, and they live completely different lives, and I absolutely love it. And so I decided to build the storyline for this house around the twin that lives with her dad on a vineyard who has also got horses. Now, with the storyline in the actual film, I didn't want to follow it completely, in a sense that I added an extra family member, because basically when it came around to decorating the inside of this house, I ended up having 4 bedrooms instead of 3, because in the film the dad lives with his daughter, and then there is also a housekeeper, which I made one of the bedrooms in this house for a housekeeper, because the household that are going to be living here in my save file, and kind of like the household that I built this house for, I imagine that a single dad would live here, a little bit of I don't want to say a bachelor, but kind of a little bit of a bachelor. I reckon that he goes out on a lot of dates with a lot of different women, basically. But I imagine that he lives here with his little girl and then also his housekeeper. But then there is also another daughter who doesn't live here full time, but she's kind of like a university student and she comes and goes. And I was thinking with the stayover feature from the Growing Together expansion pack, that might work quite well, because now you can invite not even just family members, but also like friends to come and stay for like a short period of time. But I think for my save file, yeah, I'm going to make it so there is another daughter, but she's a university student. Basically, when I was doing the floor plan, I was figuring out all the different rooms and what's going to be what. I did just have this extra bedroom, and originally I was thinking, well, what do I do with it? I could make it into the other twins' bedroom, because I think I'm going to follow this through, and I think I'm going to make another house in my save file somewhere for the other twin. So I'm basically going to be trying to recreate the Parent Trap storyline in my save file, because I mean, why not? It's so much fun, that film, and it's another interesting like storyline dynamic, and especially for gameplay. You could actually play it out in gameplay as well, which I think is quite cool. But yeah, I was thinking I could make like this second bedroom for the other twin daughter that doesn't live on this lot and lives elsewhere with the mum. But then I was thinking, but then it looks a bit weird if you want to discover that in gameplay. And so I came down to the idea of, okay, well, maybe the dad has got another daughter, maybe from like a different marriage. Maybe it was a daughter that he had before he had his twin girls, and she is now old enough and big enough to be a uni student, and yeah, she comes and stays. But yeah, that is kind of like the storyline that I've got for the Sims that are going to be living in this household, which I love it so much, just because, like I said, The Parent Trap is such a big comfort film for me. I used to watch it all the time when I was little. I also did see a few different suggestions for us as well, which makes me really happy, because I think I got one on my Discord server, and I think I also got like maybe 2 in my YouTube comments of requesting a build like this, which, I mean, I was going to do it anyway, but the fact that you've requested it makes me feel more confident about it, because it just makes me know that you also want that kind of thing. But yeah, I love the storyline for this household. I also, with the housekeeper, I think I'm going to make them so they're an active part of the household, like they're a playable sim, because in the film The Parent Trap, there is a housekeeper called Chessie, which actually, I know I've spoken about this before. I recently, in the recent years, found out that her name is not Jessie, it's Chessie with a C, like cheese. Baffling. But anyway, there is a room for my sim version of Chessie in this house, and it is on the downstairs portion. I basically imagine him to be almost like a live-in, I don't want to say butler, but someone that keeps up with the horses, does the gardening, also does the cooking, and also the cleaning, and just like the general upkeep for the house. Because the dad is a little bit of a bachelor, he's always going out on dinner dates, whining and dining Sims. Like, I imagine the housekeeper is very much the one that brings up the daughter. Don't get me wrong, I feel like the daughter and the dad are like the best of friends, but I feel like he's not so much in the house that much, and he's normally just in a bar somewhere downtown with a new lady like every single week or something. But in terms of the dad's career and kind of like his day job, I don't think technically he would need one, because if your Sims make enough wine and then they store it in the cellar and then they eventually sell the nectar, that honestly, they're earning a pretty penny. So I don't actually think they technically need a day job, like to keep the upkeep of the house and to pay the bills. But I do really like the idea of this family also owning a restaurant, more so in the world of Tartosa, because I feel like that would make complete perfect sense. We are building on the biggest lot in the world of Tartosa, so I want there to be some sort of law, like this family, they own something outside their own premises, and you can't really own bars, you can't own nightclubs, you can own retail stores, which I could maybe make it so there is a Nectar store, but I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't even know if you can do that in the game. I haven't played with the retail system since we've had the Horse Ranch expansion pack, so I don't even know if you can put a bottle of nectar up for sale. I'm actually really intrigued by that now, something that I'm going to look at tonight. But either way, I really like the idea of this household owning some sort of venue, whether it be like a wedding venue or a restaurant or something like that. And so, you know, I think I might make it so the dad's day job is he has a restaurant in maybe like the town area of Tartosa that he manages. And then, I mean, the kid's a kid. The kid just goes to school, absolutely loves horses, like lives and breathes horses, proper horse girly. She's got her own horse, probably like her best friend or something. And then, yeah, the housekeeper as well. And then also the university student, which in the bedrooms, by the way, I try to reference that they're like a temporary person, because in the university student's bedroom, I placed down like loads of different suitcases. I placed down like packed bags. I then also placed down like a little phone and keys, and then like a little map, what looks to be maybe like a map of Brychester, or maybe they've come home for like the holidays or something and they want to go explore a new place. Or I tried to make references to everything in the build somewhere, so hopefully you'll notice that when we actually move on into the furnishing. I think as well it's just quite nice having that extra bedroom, because you don't have to use it as a university student's bedroom. Say for example you want to download this build and maybe you've got a different family in mind, you don't want to stick to the storyline that I don't want to say built it around, but was very much inspired by when I was building and decorating. But say, for example, you've got a family, they've got a kid, they've got like a housekeeper or grandparents, so they're sorted for bedrooms, but maybe you've got like an infant. You could change the room around and you can just basically alter the house depending on how you want to play. I say this quite often, but it goes without saying, if ever you want to download any of my builds, you can definitely alter them, change them, just decorate them differently if you want to play in a different sort of way, because at the end of the day, I just build things that I like, and I build things for families that I imagine to live there. But you might have a different storyline and a different kind of family that you want you to play through. So yeah, you can definitely change that room around. But I do think it is quite beneficial for my save file, because I was thinking, in actual gameplay, when my save file comes out, say for example the two twin girls do actually end up eventually meeting, say for example they meet at like, I don't know, scouts or something, which I'm going with scouts because we don't have any camp system in The Sims 4. Like, your Sims can't go to summer camp, unfortunately, but we have like scouts, which is basically brownies in The Sims 4. I was thinking that maybe the twin girls met there. I mean, you could try and do the gameplay of where the girls switch lives and pretend to be each other. So like, one girl pretends to be the one that lives with her mum, but she's actually the girl that technically lives with the dad. But they basically just like switch their lives over, because the girls in the film, The Parent Trap, they want to know their other parents, and so they just basically switch up who they are. They pretend to be the other twin. But you could probably try and play through some of that kind of gameplay, and then eventually maybe you want to have it so both of the girls actually live together, and maybe you want to get the parents back together. I think that's a really cute story, because then as well the dad can maybe stop being a bachelor, and then it realizes that his like long lost love is the mum, which in the film I think her name is Elizabeth off memory. I might be completely wrong, but she's a very like bougie woman, like very high class. She owns, I think it's a wedding shop or a wedding studio, or maybe even a photography studio for weddings in London in the film. I want to basically like follow through at that idea, and I love the film and I love this concept for a storyline. So you know, I feel like having the extra bedroom is just so handy, because you can definitely just switch it out for if you wanted the extra twin to then move in. Yeah, that's kind of like the base of the storyline, and it works out really well as well, because something that I'm trying to do in my save file, I'm trying to make all these different families kind of like connected in the family tree and relationships. I know I've spoken about this before, but one of my favourite things to do in previous Sims games was to go into a household and then look at their family tree, and then basically go down a little bit of a hole of, right, okay, I'm going to click on this sim, which is like the distant cousin. Who are they married to? Okay, well, who is their son? Who is their son's wife? Like, you know, all that kind of exploring. Love doing that in previous Sims games, but unfortunately, we don't really have too much of that in The Sims 4. I mean, in newer packs, they have seemed to introduce more family members in different family trees, ever so slightly spread across different households, but it's something that is one of my main reasons why I actually started a save file, just to have like massive family trees and all of these Sims that are related from different worlds and like their cousins or friends or whatnot. And it works out really well for my save file, because yeah, like I said, I am going to follow this through, and I am going to create the mum of the household, and then I'm also going to make her have the other twin, and then probably live with the grandfather as well, like the film. But anyway, getting back and actually talking about the build and also what is currently on the screen, apologies, I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, because I'm just so excited about both this build, but then also the storyline for the build as well, just because, like I said, it's very much inspired by one of my favourite films growing up, and it just makes me so happy. And so I just got a little bit carried away, and I kind of spoke over some of the exterior furnishings, so I hope you don't mind. But you would have seen there ends up being a few different seating areas outside. There is one that is kind of on the second level of the house. Technically, it's upstairs, and your Sims will be able to go out there from the upstairs hallway, you know, like where the bedrooms are and stuff. But there ends up being like a little barbecue area. Also end up placing down a bar around that little like premises area. You wouldn't have seen me do it in the furnishing, because in the furnishing, in the room that I'm talking about, it's kind of like by the table that has the string lights. I placed down like a chest, but then when it came around to playtesting, I realised that I didn't really have that many bars for a sim or like a household that is meant to be a vineyard, and so I replaced one of these like chest things with a bar. So there is a bar upstairs as well, but then you would also see me do the exterior of the stables. Now I did decide to cut out the interior of me furnishing the stables, just because I've recently done a few builds with the Horse Ranch expansion pack, and all of my stables, I don't want to say they're very similar, but they are kind of quite, how diverse can you make a stable, honestly? They are all very similar in the sense of what do you place into them. You place down a hay bed, you place down a feeder, you place down like a little water station, and then you maybe place down a few cracks in the walls here and there. But in terms of like, I've just done it a lot recently, and so I did decide to cut it out, but you would have seen me just do the exterior part of where the horses are. I placed down some barrels, which I want you to point out, the barrels that I placed down, they're just purely decorative barrels. We do have barrels in the game which horses can like do tricks around, but it's a little bit too big and I didn't have the space. I probably could have squeezed it in next to the jumps at the front of the build, but I just decided, tell you what, for like storytelling purposes, I'm not going to place down the actual barrels, but I'm going to place down almost like pretend barrels. So you still get the same idea, it's just the ones that I place down, your Sims and their horses can't interact with. You could probably just have a little bit of a shift about and make it so there is both jumps and the barrels on this lot, but just for the way that I wanted it to look and just the way that I wanted to lay it out, I just decided not to do that. But anyway, as you can see, I have now moved on into the inside of the house. Started off by the little front entrance hallway area, but I've currently moved on into the kitchen. I absolutely love this kitchen. It really just makes me so happy because I did something that I haven't done in such a long time, and it was, I tried to make it look like the oven was a little bit more fancier than what it actually is. So you can see the way that I have done it, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Basically, I put some walls either side of like this oven area, and then I put some columns and then some spandrels to make it look like it is like a proper big oven, proper big like stove area. Maybe it's like a built-in or something like that. It just makes me so happy. I haven't done this in so long, but it just really makes the build and it really makes the kitchen. If you're wondering, it's usable. Like, your Sims can use it, your Sims can interact with it. But one thing that I did notice when I came around to playtesting this build, like I said, I have fully playtested it. There wasn't really any issues with the build. Like, there was a few different objects that was a little bit too close to one object, and then I had to smudge it over a little bit, and then it was interactable. But like, in terms of like actual major features that weren't usable, everything works absolutely fine. One thing that I wanted to point out about the kitchen though, really bizarre, you see how I've done it? So we've got like the oven, and then you've got like a little bit of a space, and then you've got some more counters with the sink in. Sims won't walk there. I cannot wrap my head around it, but for some reason the space in between, there's like one tile in between the end counter, the one that hasn't got the sink on, the tile in front of that, Sims just don't like it. That you can still use the oven, you can still use the coffee machine, you can still use the fridge. It is a fully functioning kitchen, but for some reason, Sims won't walk that way around. Like, you direct them to walk in, like say for example you're standing by the fridge and you direct them to walk to the oven. They won't walk through this like little passageway in between the counters. They'll walk around it. Can't wrap my head around it. I have no idea why they are doing that. I wanted to mention it though, just in case you download this build and you are thinking, what is going on here? Honestly, I ain't got a clue. But don't worry, it still works, but your Sims just have a bit of a weird path. I just can't wrap my head around it because, yeah, like I said, the coffee machine works, both of the fridges work, the oven works, there is enough counter space for your Sims to prepare food. Like, I got my Sims to bake some bread, also to make some franken beans, and then also some scrambled egg in this kitchen. Like, I've play tested all the different like counter things, oven baking things, stove things. I've tested it all, and it all works. It's just for some reason they decided to go a bit of a long way round, if you want to put it that way, in the kitchen. But yeah, I mean, it's still 100% functional, which is something that I wanted to mention. But other than that, the house is completely usable and you shouldn't run into any problems in it. Something that I also did encounter when I was running through like my playtesting bit. I playtest all my houses very thoroughly, but sometimes I like to place them down into different save files, because sometimes if you replace a house down, there might be issues in the house that you wouldn't have noticed if you would have just built it. Say for example, if you use platforms and columns, and especially if you use them both together, which in the kitchen space you can see that I did. So basically, you see where the oven is, and I've got the two columns and then the spandrels. It looks beautiful. I really love the idea of it, and I really like the look of it. But something that I noticed in one of the save files that I placed down this house in, not every single one, because I placed it down into 3 separate save files, but in one of them, when I placed it down from my library, them columns by the oven just deleted, which quite rude, but the columns deleted, and I couldn't re-add them back in, because sometimes with columns in The Sims 4, when you try and place them down, if you want to level them down, like make them shorter, sometimes you'll get like a little notification saying the column can't be like put any shorter, like this is the shortest it goes to. You might run into that issue with the kitchen, but don't worry, because I did a workaround. Basically, with the kitchen, where the oven is, if that runs into an issue and you place down this house and the columns by the oven have disappeared or they've just gone a bit skew with, basically you can click on the little tiny room where the oven is, lower it back down into the floor, so only lower it down by one platform click. You can then replace the columns and then re-level it back up, and then the columns will be there. It was just a weird thing that I encountered when I was playtesting this build, and I'm so happy that I playtest all of my builds so thoroughly, because if I would have just playtested this build straight off the save file that I built it in, I wouldn't have run into that issue. But it was only because I placed it down in one version from my library, and yeah, in just one version that happened to me. And so I did just want to let you know in case you run into that problem, because I can imagine that can be quite a infuriating problem if you do run into that. But anyway, you can see in the kitchen I end up having kind of like a little breakfast room off it. In the breakfast room I end up placing down like a little round table, a little like fancy china cabinet, a plant in the corner. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the next dining room, which is the more fancy one, but it also ends up doubling up as the hallway. I don't know if this is a bit of a weird thing to say that you love about a build, but I love the floor plan for this house, because I feel like the floor plan is, one, really easy to like navigate your way around in terms of like gameplay and stuff, but the way that it just came together and the way that things worked out was just really nice. Because oftentimes when I build bigger houses, more fancy, kind of like expensive-ish mansion kind of builds, or like McMansions, what people call them, I sometimes like to have like a breakfast room, but then also a fancy dining room. But then sometimes it's quite hard to fancy it's quite hard to decorate the fancy dining room, but it ended up being also the hallway space, which then leads out into both the lounge room, and then also it leads onto the upstairs. This is where the staircase is. It's just really easy. Like, I really love the floor plan for this house. But in here, as well as the staircase and also just functioning as a hallway, it ends up having quite a large dining room table. The one that I've used is from the Jungle Adventure game pack. I then paired it with these chairs, which are from Cats and Dogs. I always do this combo of this table and chairs just because I really like it. And also these Cats and Dog chairs, the ones with kind of like the wicker, like the wicker seat area. I was about to call it the wicker bum area, but the wicker seat area, I just really like it. They're literally some of my favourite chairs that we have in the game, but I use them in combination. I then placed down a Get Famous rug underneath it, one of my favourite rugs in the game, which I feel like I haven't used that much as what I used to use, but it's from Get Famous and it looks a little bit more like old. It looks like it's had a few tears in it. It looks like it's just been a used rug in this household for a little while. So I placed that down. There is also a fireplace in this room, and I don't know if the right terminology for it is a double-breasted fireplace. Basically, see where the fireplace is on, well, it's actually just off the screen, but it's on the left-hand side. On that fireplace, on the opposite wall, on the other side, there is also the same fireplace. So it's like one massive chimney, what I imagine would run through the whole entire house. But then there is also a few different doors in this room. One of them technically goes out to the front of the build, which is a bit bizarre because the way that this lot was made in The Sims 4, the front entrance, which you saw me do with all the different grapevines and the kind of like the tiered cake, kind of like terrain manipulation, that is technically the front of the lot. But then if you actually spin the camera around, it looks like that other back area is meant to be the front of the lot because it's where like the road leads up to. So basically there is multiple different front doors in this household. I have set the one by the front of the build as the front door, the one that I cluttered with like a little mud curry and like the mirror and stuff. I set that one in gameplay to be the front door, but there is actually technically another front door. There's like two front doors in this house. It's really confusing, but it's just the way that this lot is placed in the world of Tartosa. It's something that I can't really control. I didn't really want the front of the house, which is technically the back of the house, to look like a back garden and there not to be any entrance. And so when I was doing the exterior part for the technically back of the house, that's why I placed down some cars and stuff. It's really confusing, but either way, there's a few different front doors in this house, is basically what I'm trying to say. But you can see that I've moved over and I've started furnishing the lounge room. This lounge ends up being absolutely colossal, but don't get me wrong, absolutely love it. In here, I placed down these Chesterfield-ish looking sofas. The ones that I've used are from the Growing Together expansion pack. Also placed down the same like fireplace chimney, popped a little TV on there. I then also sized down, but then also, when I say sized down, I levelled down into the floor, but then sized up this bookcase. It works. I honestly didn't expect that to work. I was just doing it for kind of like an empty filler, just to kind of like fill out the space in this room. But yeah, you see that bookcase that is kind of in between the curtains by the window. 100% usable. Like, your Sims can actually interact with it, which is absolutely bizarre. Like, why can my Sims get a book from that bookcase but they can't walk in front of the kitchen sink? Like, where's the maths? I do not know. The game actually confuses me sometimes. But yeah, I just finished up the lounge room. In the lounge room, there ends up being a chess table, and then yeah, also a few different like rocking chairs, little like seating areas. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the next room, which is the first bedroom, which is the housekeeper's room. So I designed this bedroom for a Sim that I imagined isn't part of like the family tree. Like, they're probably not related, although I could make them related if people think that I should. But I was just thinking maybe like a housekeeper that has been a part of his household for like literally years, probably ever since the little girl was brought home from the hospital. Like, she's literally been a part of this household, taking care of the horses, doing the cooking, doing the cleaning, just general upkeep of this house. And as kind of like her pay, she probably does get some sort of like commission from it. But I was also imagining she just gets to live in this house. I don't know where I imagine that she would be from. Maybe she's from like, I don't know, Oasis Springs, or maybe she's from like Chestnut Ridge or something. A world kind of similar to Tartosa that could be, because when I think of The Sims 4 in terms of like all the different worlds, I try and think of like the neighbouring worlds to the world. So for me, when I think of Tartosa, I feel like Oasis Springs is probably only around 2-hour drive from this world. Maybe Chestnut Ridge is also quite close. Maybe she's from Chestnut Ridge or something, I don't know. But I basically just wanted to decorate a room for a housekeeper who, you don't have to have it as a housekeeper. She could just definitely be like a grandparent's room, or you could make it into maybe like a butler's quarter or something. But in here I end up using the new bed that we got from the Horse Ranch expansion pack. Also use the new wardrobe, which I'm still absolutely obsessed with this wardrobe. I just think it's so pretty. But then I also end up placing down a fireplace in this room. There is a chimney on the exterior, and above this room it's kind of where I have that exterior kind of like barbecue bar area upstairs outside. There is also a chimney there, or like a fireplace there, but as there was space for one in this room, I decided to place down a fireplace, and the one that I use is from the Cottage Living expansion pack. Also placed down like a little corkboard with some postcards in her room as well, because I was thinking that maybe that sim, maybe she has family members that often write to her, maybe she has like pen pals or something, and so I placed that down into her room. But now, as you can see, I have now moved on into the next room, which is the home office. Then it also doubles up as the room that leads to the wine cellar. Now I'm thinking about it, I don't think I've mentioned at any point in this voiceover that there is in fact a basement and a wine cellar in this house, but I feel like that was probably a bit of a given. But yeah, there is somewhere where your Sims can come and actually actively make the wine in this household, and to access it you have to go down this staircase in this room. But I originally was going to make kind of like a little small like staircase room that literally would just be like one tile wide with a door, so then your Sims can walk down into the basement that way. But then I decided, well, why don't I make it so the home office actually also doubles up to be the wine cellar, because I feel like personally sometimes when I do floor plans that have basements and there's just kind of like a single door leading down into the basement, it can kind of feel a bit hidden, which sometimes I really like having like a little hidden basement, or like a little secret area that your Sims, like when they invite their friends around, might not know is there, and they might think it's just like a door that goes to a bathroom or something. Sometimes I like that idea for storytelling, but I was thinking that maybe the dad of his household often has his friends come round, maybe like all of his mates come round every weekend or something, and they like to make nectar together. You know how some people like to craft beer? Maybe the dad likes to do wine, or maybe the dad likes to make wine with his friends, as well as also just like sell it and make that his income. But yeah, I placed down the staircase into the home office, which then leads down into the basement and the cellar, which you can see that I'm now coming in and starting decorating. So in terms of what's actually in the basement, I did decide to cut it out just because it was making the video a little bit too long. But when you initially walk down from the staircase, there is a few different like shelving units, nothing interactable, it's just like purely decorative, that I tried to make seem like some sort of basement-y items, like extra pillows, extra blankets, extra just stuff for the house. And then there is also a get-together wardrobe in the hallway, and then there is also a little utility room as well, which has a washing machine and a tumble dryer. But then there is also a door which then comes into this area, which is both the downstairs bar, so your Sims can come down here, they can practice their mixology skill, they can do a little chit chat, but then they can also make the wine. So I placed down 2 of the nectar making stations. I then also placed down some of them nectar storage racks, I think they're called. I don't know what they're called, but you know, like where your Sims can actively store the wine. And also a really nice detail that they've added with this expansion pack, the Horse Ranch expansion pack, is the fact that when you store wine in your Sims basement or like a cellar, it ages better. Or I think it's either better or faster, or it might even be both. But I love that idea. I also end up placing down some of these little like wine cabinet unit things on the upstairs. You might see me do it in, you know, that big hallway, which is also kind of like the fancy dining room. I also placed down some of them upstairs, but I was more so thinking that was when the Sims family like sit down, they have dinner as a family, maybe they get a bottle of wine from there. Whereas the ones that are stored in the basement or in the cellar, these are more so ones that are going to be over time aging and then eventually be sold for quite an extortionate price. But I placed down at 2 of the little like nectar making stations, also them little like storage units that I said. I then also placed down a big basket. The one that I've used is from the Jungle Adventure game pack. I sized it up, and then I also found some grapes, strawberries, and I think apples, and then I sized them up and then rotated them to make it look like they're things that have recently been harvested from the garden in this household. So your Sims have been out there in the garden, they've been harvesting all the different basically harvestables for nectar making, and they've popped them into that basket, and maybe they're like ready to go, maybe they've already been like pre-washed and stuff, and yeah, they're just waiting to be stepped upon. But over here you can see on the other side of the room, this is where I placed down the bar. So the bar itself is from the Get Together expansion pack, and then I use the new chairs which are from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, pretty much the same exact like wooden tone I found anyway, but I use them in combination. And then behind the actual bar area itself, I wanted to have some sort of unit, some sort of like cabinet storage looking kind of thing, and I was going to use one of them bar backs because for some reason in The Sims 4 we have an obscene amount of back-ins for bars, you know, like that looks like it's got all different kind of like beverages and loads of different like fancy bits and bobs related to bar work. Well, we have got a few of them in the game, but I didn't really necessarily want to use one, and so I basically tried to create my own. I used some counters that we got from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, also placed down a little sink onto them. Maybe that's where the Sims would like wash their fruit before they stomp on them. Also placed down some like herbs on the wall, also placed down some like just purely like decorative things, like it's a bread box, but I imagine it's probably not got bread in it. And then also like a utensils rack and just loads of just stuff. Also ended up placing down some barrels in that room, as well as a radio station. So your Sims can go down there, they can stomp on some apples or whatever they fancy, whatever kind of nectar they want to make, and then they can drink it from the bar and then turn the radio on and then have a little dance. But anyway, as you can see, I've now moved on to the upstairs, and I started off by furnishing one of the bathrooms. So like I already mentioned, this house ends up having 3 bathrooms. There is 2 upstairs. This one has a bathtub and then the other one has a shower. There isn't one that has both, just because I couldn't really manage to make it fit in terms of like how I wanted to lay the rooms out. Currently, you can see in this bathroom, I kind of have 2 little 1 tile rooms either side the bathtub. I don't do it on camera because if I would have done it on camera, the game might have been a bit weird, because sometimes when I level up platforms in my game, the game kind of like glitches out, but I end up placing down platforms in between them 2 walls. So in gameplay, if you play with half walls up, half walls down, there'll be just like a normal exterior wall, if that makes any sense. But I wanted to have some sort of built-in unit for the bathtub. The bathtub itself is from, I believe, the Cottage Living expansion pack, and then I placed down like a little toilet, also placed down this little storage unit that looks like it's got like towels and potentially like toilet rolls in it and stuff. The one that I've used is from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, but something that I've noticed, and I'm pretty sure I said about this in my last build, but this new bathroom cabinet isn't in the bathroom decoration category. Really baffling. I'm unsure why. Like, why did they not put it into that category? But if you are looking for that item, you have to go into the shelving unit, and it's under the shelves, which I feel like sometimes there is so many different items in the game which I completely forget about. Because say for example, a really nice side table, one that I can use as an actual example is, you know, the Desert Luxe kit. We've got this really nice kind of like side table that also like kind of curves on the edges. It's really beautiful, but it's not in the side table category. You have to go into the shelving category. It baffles me. But anyway, moving on. As you can see, I've now moved on into the next room, which is the next bedroom, and this one is for the little girl. So this is the bedroom for the twin that doesn't actually know she's a twin. She is just going to discover at one point in her life that she's going to be a twin, or she already has a twin. She's just completely not knowledgeable of this currently. But in here I wanted to decorate it to show that she had some sort of interest with horses. Now I imagine that one of the horses in the stables is hers. She consistently rides it. She's probably really good at horse jumping and just riding in general. She's probably like a bit of an expert, because I imagine that where she doesn't have too many toys in her room, it kind of pushed her to go outdoors more, and what is outside in her house? A horse. And so I imagine that she probably spends the majority of her time not in here, but in fact in the stables. But I wanted to show some sort of interest to horses. There isn't really that many horsey decorations, I find anyway, for kids' bedrooms. We do have one base game toy, and it's a horse, and you can size that up, which I did do in this bedroom. But then we also have like one picture frame, and then there is also a kind of poster mural thing that we got from the Hawks Ranch expansion pack, but it doesn't look like a bedroom poster. It looks like a billboard or something. It doesn't really look like it belongs in a bedroom, but that is one thing that kind of disappointed me a little bit about the Hawks Ranch expansion pack. Don't get me wrong, the build and buy is one of my favourite build and buys for any pack ever. It is just so big and it is just so good. Like all the details, all the meshes, like look at that wardrobe in this room. The detail on that wardrobe is absolutely just chef's kiss. I cannot fault it. But the one thing that I can fault is I feel like we didn't get enough kid related stuff. We got like a few different things here and there that you can use in kids rooms, but as I would have liked maybe just like an extra poster, or maybe, you know, the teddy bears that kids can like cuddle, or if they're a bit angry they can like hit them. I would have loved one of them in a horse form, although I wouldn't even know how that would look, because how would the horse sit? We have one of a dog and we have one of a cat, but it's kind of sitting like a dog and a cat. Like a horse doesn't sit like them teddy bears, but either way, I would have liked something like that in the game. But besides the point, in here I use the bed that is from the High School Years expansion pack. Also end up placing down like a little shelving unit by her bed, and then I also placed down some postcards right by where her pillow was. And I was thinking, you know, her sister, she's a university student, she either is away at university or maybe she'll come home for the holidays or something. I imagine they're postcards from her sister, which I just thought was a really nice little cute detail. But you can see that I've actually now moved on into the next room, which is actually the said sister's room. So in here I really tried to get the point across that this sim isn't a consistent household member. They're kind of like a more of a temporary one that kind of like comes and goes. And like I said, I imagine in gameplay you could do this from the stay over feature from the Growing Together expansion pack. So I imagine that this sister actually lives away in Rochester. She lives in some student housing, and she'll probably come home for like the holidays. She might come home for like birthdays and special events, but for the most part she doesn't really live here. But she still has got a bedroom at like her dad's house. And so in here I really tried to get the point across by placing down like a suitcase and an old chest, which I imagine that chest is probably also a bit of a suitcase. I was thinking back to, you know, the Hannah Montana movie. In that film, when she arrives back at her hometown, she has like this massive chest and she gets changed out of it. I imagine it was something like that. So like that chest is kind of like a suitcase in my mind. I then also moved objects, a little map, which is from the debug menu from the Snowy Escape expansion pack, onto the chest. So I was thinking, or maybe she has popped home for like, I don't know, Winterfest or something, but maybe she's planned a trip to go to Mount Komorebi. Maybe she's going to go to Mount Komorebi for a few days with her friends, and she's going to be a little bit of an explorer and stuff. Also placed down like a phone next to it. Also placed down some like car keys and stuff. There also ends up being a get-together wardrobe in that room, as well as a bookcase. But you can see that I've now moved on into the next room, which is the last bedroom and also just the last room in this house. But this is the dad's bedroom. So in here I decided to use the bed which is from the Horse Ranch expansion pack. I was initially really umming and ahhing about this bed, because if you was to look at the bed itself is absolutely beautiful. It's got this really nice detail headboard. It looks like the headboard's kind of got like a wooden outline, and then the part where you would kind of like lay up against the headboard seems to have some sort of fabric. I don't know what it is, but it's really pretty. I really wanted to use this bed, but I was really debating the colour swatch that I wanted to use it in, because I really liked the contrast of like the brown wood with kind of like the white backing of the fabric. But it just so happens to be the duvet cover of this bed that has that is quite western looking. I mean, I feel like I managed to make it work, but I was really struggling with it, because initially when I placed it down, it just made this bedroom feel a little bit more western than what I wanted it to be. But in here I ended up placing down a wardrobe, also ended up placing down like a little bookcase, an armchair, plant in the corner, I think also potentially a mirror as well. But apart from that, I'm going to go around the room, finish it off, add some final details, and that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or you can search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content, then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedbuilding video. Bye guys.